Are you fascinated to hear Indian rhythms? And do you want to know how you could transfer Indian rhythms onto Western drums? If your answer is yes, this episode is for you.
Welcome to The Power of Rhythm, a podcast with your host Reinhard Flatischler around the one thing that connects us all. Rhythm.
Hi and welcome back to the Power of Rhythm podcast. I'm delighted to talk today to a world-renowned drummer and percussionist who has actually Austrian roots. And as many drummers before, he went to India to learn the complexity of the system, also called the Tala system. But different to so many others, he did not just learn the tabla or the bakavach or the mridangam, which are drums from India, but he transferred the complexity of these Indian rhythms onto the Western drum set. And he did this under the guidance of his teacher and the Indian master drummer, Talyogi Pandit Suresh Talwalkar. So with that, he created a real unique new drum style that made him absolutely a fixed point in the today's world of drummers. Today he's my guest. Welcome, Bernhard Schimpelsberger.
Thank you, Reinhard. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, my dear. And so let's right go into it because there's so much to explore. I know you have been in Brazil and you actually are very multicultural, so you know a lot of different drums in this world. Yet you made one statement, and I quote you. You said, Indian rhythm is the most profound rhythm system in the world. Now, can you explain this to us? Why is the Indian rhythm system the most complex or the most profound rhythm system in the world? Why do you see it like this?
Yeah, well, I think one aspect that's really unique about Indian, or there's a couple of very unique aspects. The first thing is, as you already mentioned, the Tala system, where there is 108 different time cycles, and to play not just in 4 or in 3 and 4 and then 6 and 8, but then to be able to play in any time signature, whether it's an 11 and a half or a 17, that's part of the Indian repertoire, which makes it so complex. And the other aspect really is language. There is different languages in India, different dialects. They come from different drums or different art forms. But because of that system of language, there is sort of an infinite amount of possibilities of how you can combine rhythms and how you can create rhythms, and I think that is something, the kind of the methodology that exists in India regarding those aspects is totally unique.
Okay, and here comes one problem that someone faces now. The drum set is polyrhythmic and polyphonic. You have 4 layers happening at the same time. With the tabla, you have the tabla and the maya. There's 2 drums, you can only make 2 sounds. You can combine them, but how do you cope with that, which is quite different, the drum set and the Indian drum types?
Well, it's fantastic that you're hitting the nail on the head, as they say. This is one of the big challenges, really, because the Indian system is a linear system, and you can only have 2 sounds at the same time, really. But on the drum kit, you have this polyrhythmic influence, which in essence comes from African rhythm. So I cannot give you one answer that there is one solution, but I think this is part of this lifelong process of translation, let's say, where for each rhythm, you're always trying to find a different kind of a balance. And it's sort of roughly this, talking about it, I'd like to call it the literal and the abstract. So if you take a rhythm from India and you transfer it in the literal way, in a very systematic and a very disciplined way, then you will get a certain result. And then if you go to the other side of the spectrum, where you take a lot of liberty and you maybe only take the concept, then you will get a more abstract or a more contemporary result. And for each rhythm, in a way, you have to define yourself. Where do I want to be on the scale? Do I want to be on the right, on the left, or somewhere in the middle? And the journey of learning still goes on.
Yes, and of course, if you want to create something new, which I think we both have in common, we're not just wanting to translate literally one thing to the other, because then you could just play tabla. You're creating something new, and certainly when I hear you playing, that is a very new drum style, and that's what this episode is so fascinating about, because, there are so many drummers out in the world, the drum, everyone, many more people play drums than percussion. And you are a kind of mixing it together. For me, you're like a percussionist and a drummer at the same time when I hear you. And you have something that I have not heard anyone in Europe master, maybe beside of Flor Kotler. You are so eloquent in reciting the rhythms. How did you learn this? Did you learn it in South India and North India, or because they're a little different, right?
That's
South
right. Yeah.
Indian kind of call.
Yeah, both the systems are a bit different. Well, my guru, you already mentioned his name, Pandit Suresh Talwalkar. He's actually a tabla player, and he's based in the North Indian system, but he was a pioneer of bringing South Indian rhythms into North Indian tabla playing, you could say. So from him, I learned mainly North Indian, which is based on the language of the tabla, but then also a lot of South Indian. And then I had a few teachers in the South. So I traveled to the South for a few weeks, and I had a teacher in India, but those were not gurus. There's already a big distinction there. It was not one person that I would dedicate myself to for many years, but it was going to different teachers and learning. And when I moved to London, I had a great South Indian experience because I started to play in all the Tal kacheris, which are the percussion concerts.
Yeah.
And I always ask them each time to teach me some new concept or some new composition. And then finally, for my master's thesis, I took a very old Carnatic book, which I translated and sort of abstracted for Western musicians. And that was really sort of the hardcore system of Carnatic and how you think and how you count and so on. So all of those things together, in a way, inform my understanding, let's say.
I think at this point, people who listen to our podcast are quite curious how that would sound, and I think that's the moment where we should give them the chance to listen to that, okay? Now, there are two more questions I have concerning the Indian learning process. When you learn tabla, every sound means a particular movement on the drum. If you say tun tun, it means tun tun dedicate. Every tabla player would know how to play that. So how can you transfer this on a drum?
That's where the fun starts, and that's where the frustration starts as well. Many times over the years in India, I said to myself, "You cannot do this. You got to stop this. It doesn't make any sense." But of course, you do get also rewarded in other ways. So it's all about I think this was also one of the reasons why I wanted to also study jazz drums and really be connected with Western music, and why I didn't actually live in India as a professional musician. After I finished my studies, I moved to London, where I felt, there's a really high level of Western music, and I'll be challenged. Because if I went to India, obviously the drums, I could do whatever I want pretty much in terms of the reference to the Western style. So I think the more you know about your own instrument and the history and where it comes from and the different styles, in a way, the different forms that the instrument has to cater to and express, the more choices you have. And that's why in terms of the actual sounds, it really depends which kind of style of drumming you want to play. A jazz drummer would play tune differently than a hip hop drummer. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's sort of part of the decision making.
Okay. Now, in order that all this can happen, you must have a real open-minded guru, a teacher who guides you in this. And so I want to know a little bit more about Yogi Pandit Suresh Talwalkar. Now, of course, I've heard his name many times. He is Pandit, which means he comes from the Hindu tradition, because all the Bakawaj players are Pandits, and most of the tabla players are Ustads, right, which come of the Muslim tradition. Isn't that true?
I think tabla players, there's also a lot of Pandits. I think it's very, I think it's quite balanced. I think there's a lot of both.
So tell us a little bit about him and how you met him, and now people listening to us today, let's say drummers, do they need a guru? Do they need a teacher there if they want to go a similar path like you?
No, they don't need. I mean, there is, nothing happens. You don't get thrown into the ocean and you're told, swim or die. Everything happens a step at a day, at a time. And this love that I have for Indian music and for my guru, it happened over many years and over many experiences. And so I can really encourage everybody to check out Indian rhythm, even if this is something that an Indian musician wouldn't agree with, because you don't go and check it out. But it's something that engage yourself, learn something, even if you just learn one rhythm, that's fantastic. You will be richer by one rhythm. And if you learn 5, you'll be richer by 5. And if you manage to understand the different concepts, you are enriched by another concept, another way of looking at the world. So this, I can really, encourage everybody to just start. And I think the times have changed also because I started about 23 years ago. Makes me feel old. But that time, the world was different. The internet didn't exist. Zoom, we didn't have a pandemic where you can just go on Zoom and say, hey, can we do 5 sessions? I've got this much. Things have changed. But of course, to answer your question, there is a thing called Guru Shishya Parampara. Guru is the master, Shishya is the student, and Parampara is tradition. And it's really the ancient way of learning in India, the Indian traditional way, which could be a little bit compared to a master-apprentice relationship that maybe we used to have in the 15th century or the 17th century. Even in classical music, Western classical music, you have sort of lineages, and you had very particular styles, and one master would represent a certain style, in India it's called Gharana. And that Yes, that only comes from a lot of time and really spending your life together. And with my guru, I've spent 23 years of my life, more than half my life, and it's a sort of an unconditional commitment towards each other, which is just beautiful. Which is like you have it with your father or your mother. You will be there all your life with them, and that that does maybe help you to go to other levels of enjoyment and engagement. And I'm not saying understanding necessarily, because I don't want to say that I understood more than others, but you engage in a different way, maybe in a more complete way.
And I really appreciate your attitude that say, well, just if you can't go and have a teacher, a guru-shishya relationship, you just check out Indian rhythm and see what the richness gives you, and even go to India. That might even, bring a completely new perception of the world, seeing what's possible in India, in a way. I've been 32 times in India, and it has really kind of, changed my life very dramatically to the better.
And do you go to one place usually? Or you always go to different places?
No, I've been to every place. Most basically, there's no every place, but Calcutta, I studied the Bakawaj, then I turned to Bombay, where Pandit Sheshwal was teaching me the Bakawaj. Then, of course, I was learning with Alaraka, and where I met Sakir, and then, of course, we had this great relationship where we played together.
Amazing.
And then, of course, I went to Kerala and Tamil Nadu and all these places, and they all give you something different. But just being there, watching a Kathakali performance, even if you don't understand what's happening, changes something rhythmically in you.
Yeah.
So your whole attitude, I like very much these books that you built. Like you wherever you are in Brazil, or so you give something, where it's a short introduction into candomblé, for example, And so people get curious maybe about and go there, And if you're a drummer, if you're a musician, you cannot live without, the nourishment of what's around you. You cannot just play for yourself and grow. You have to have something very nice. And so now there is the next thing we're going to, in my opinion, that I really want to show our listeners. You are also a composer, and there is Kismet, actually a composition. My first question: have you composed this alone, or have you composed it together with Rakesh Chaurasia?
I composed it together with Rakesh Bhai, and he sort of gave me the melodic structure which we wanted to keep really close to Indian raga music, classical, and then I did the orchestration, which obviously is like the Western part.
So here comes your piano training in the young age, and I think it's very important, because I'm also composing for orchestras, and I think this is quite some unique way of expressing music as well. So at this point, people are very curious again. Let's listen a little bit to Kismet and your beautiful dialogue in the end, actually. Kismet, Bernhard Schimpelsberger with Rakesh Chaurasia. Actually, who was the conductor and the orchestra?
That's Leslie Sundaranjanan, who is a Sri Lankan conductor. I think he's in Salzburg at the moment. I think he's got a position there now.
Because he seems also to know something about the music. Because if you have a normal conductor, I think that would be quite difficult.
It was a fantastic process because we had a week to work with the orchestra, and we were in exchange a lot, and you know, every day we would sort of iron out things. So that it was great for him to be able to learn something and to be open and to ask me, so what does it mean when you and where does it come in and so on. Yeah.
Beautiful. And when I just checked out your whole work, you know, I came also to the Circle of Sound, and this was really a treasure trove for me because Anoushka Shankar, of course, I knew, but Nitin Sawhney and Sumikdata I didn't know before. So, and this is amazing. So, how did this come together, the Circle of Sound?
That was really after I finished my studies in India, you can say I was 25. Then I moved to London. And I wanted to work with a lot of musicians, and especially in that crossover with Indian music and other forms. And that's a great thing in London. You can do really classical, and you can do jazz and rock and punk. And there I met Shomik Datta, who is a young sarod virtuoso. So sarod is the fretless lute instrument, classical. And we wanted to create sort of a different sound together, and we wanted to use the percussion instead of tabla. So we started off really classical. We played really Indian classical ragas together, and I played the cajon, and then I had my drum kit. And then over time, we became a bit more contemporary, and then we added strings and, you know, how it goes. And at that moment, we invited Anoushka Shankar and Nitin Sawhney because we had worked with them before in separate occasions. And we had a big launch concert in London at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and we said, it would be amazing if we could bring them, because they were on the album as well. Yeah, exactly. On the second album, they joined us for a track each.
I was amazed when I heard the music, really deep music. Now let's go back to one thing for our young drummers. You know, now you are pianist, grown up, and people tell you, at least I read this, oh, you're not so good pianist, so you use this as a percussion instrument. Now you went all of a sudden into the drums, and then you went to India. There must have been a point where you were completely devastated. You were like questioning everything. And if there was this point, I would be so curious. How did you get out of it? What did you learn out of this moment, and what could you give our young drummers from this moment?
Yeah, I think the main thing really, you know, mentally is to not do it because you want to be famous or you want to arrive at a certain point, but it's a journey. It's your own journey of discovery and learning. And I think you and I, we both have the same aesthetic, that we just love rhythm and we love to learn, and we don't think of ourselves as great. We are students. And the one person that we both know very well, Zakir Hussain, probably the greatest master, you know, he always calls himself a student. And if somebody like that can do that, you know, it should be a lesson for everybody else, you know. So the point is that I think, you know, it's the journey that matters, and the journey of discovery, and not really, you know, like a final product. And on my journey, there was moments of frustration. And I mean, one funny episode was that, so when I was 15 or 16, I was playing with older musicians in Linz, and they were studying at the university, and I was still in school. And so all the university teachers knew me because I used to rehearse at the university, and they said to me, you know what, it would be great to have you, which was a really nice gesture. And then I went to India, and I was very intense, and I built this little drum kit, like a small percussion drum kit. And when I came back after my second trip to India, I applied to go to the university, and they said to me, you know what, you used to play better before. And I was thinking, how is it possible? But sort of my realization was that when you go into some other place, you are in the middle of like a typhoon, and the dust takes time to settle. And maybe they were right, I was playing maybe my playing wasn't balanced. Maybe I was playing very percussive. Maybe I wasn't doing what a drummer should be doing or what they expected a drummer to be doing. Maybe I was playing much more like a percussionist. So I think the one advice for the young students is don't throw it away, stick to it, give it time. So if I had stopped there, probably my style would have been a mess. But because I've kept focused and it takes a long time. It's like digestion. You have to digest it. And that's where the long journey becomes very, sort of rewarding, because after a few years, you feel like, now I can work with this. Now it's not just notes that I've written down. Actually, I've got it inside now and I can use it. And then the liberty and the freedom comes to use it in other styles, not necessarily the way you were taught, but then to transfer it and to translate it. And it takes time.
I would even say if you don't encounter those moments that you describe, you're not on the path. You're just on a linear trying to do something, The path has to kind of be an earthquake inside of you that brings you to another level, Like when I was going out of piano, and that was pretty good, and I was learning with Gulda, and so everyone said, well, you should proceed with that. And then I was tabla and percussion. It was a complete mess. I don't know if I'm a tabla player, piano player. And I had to go through this very, very uneasy, moment where everyone said, you were just a white guy from Vienna. What do you want to do with drums and blah, blah, blah. And out of that came actually TaKeTiNa, the system I developed over time. And one important moment was the Talwalkar Utsav. I don't know if you've heard about this. This was an Indian festival where the Indian government invited everyone, and that's where I actually met for the first time also Trilok. And I know that.
Was it in Bombay?
Yeah, it was.
I think I have seen a video of that.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. But was that around like early 90s?
No, it was earlier. It must have way earlier. It was in the 80s.
Okay, brilliant. I think we're talking about the same thing, yeah.
Okay,
and in that same one, Sakebai also played, right?
Yeah, and Babatunde Olatunji was there, and all the drummers from different, Chinese drummers, Korean drummers, they invited everyone there too. And then this was the moment where I said, well, in the performance, Bali and China and Korea, this was so absolutely brilliant and together. And in the evening, we were in a hotel, then they tried to play together, and it didn't really come together because the grammar, didn't really function. And so this was the start for me to create mega drums, where I brought in people like from Africa and Korea together.
Amazing. Yeah.
And now so we have a pretty similar,
Yeah. Maybe I could add one thought, and maybe that's something that also relates to you with TaKeTiNa, and in this moment of the pandemic and everything. I think pain is useful. It's helpful. It's pain, change, put it that way. Change is painful. Like even a small child, when it grows and the bones, and then there's pain, and the same thing happens also spiritually and musically, that when you are sort of putting yourself out there against something strong, something different, you're going to encounter all your inner demons of resistance and so on, and also some sort of pain. And when you work through it, the healing puts you on another level.
Absolutely. I feel this is such an important message, because especially before the pandemic, everything was so easy, like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. People were just, doing random things. And now as the crisis comes in, people are challenged to see, what is my life about? Is it just about, getting more followers? Or, and, also when I was starting music, we had something called the Schnürsenkel, which was just one small tape and you had to play. And if it was wrong, you had to play it again because cutting it was impossible, So you had a very different attitude to what you have today. Oh, let's do it like this, then tune it up, cut it out. And so I'm not saying this is the better times or these are the worst times, but mentioning just what you said is so important. If you do not hit some resistance, if you don't engage into pain, not that pain itself is good, but you go through that, you won't grow. As you say, even with bones and so with the body, it's a growth process for sure. Yeah. And so you certainly have done this. And we are going now to your recent video production, which is called Segalia. And is this reference to the flamenco style?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And is it also inspired from your collaboration with Israel Galvan, this very legend of flamenco dancer?
Exactly. That was one of sort of the main pieces of that production that I did with Israel and Akram Khan, the dancer. And I was fascinated by that kind of, by the palmas and the time cycle, because the time cycle sort of brings me a little bit towards Indian aesthetic in terms of the cyclic nature, but then the kind of clave concept of boom, this subdivision that's pulsing through, is what I love to relate more to the African, sort of rhythmic tradition. You've got a clave and you can play in and you can play out. And so it's something that, I don't know, for me, I can't put it into words yet, but maybe it's one of those things that you can approach from different perspectives.
Yeah, I watched Galvan dancing yesterday on the video. It's just out of this world. The expression he brings on the stage, like, whoa, that's from another world. I've seen quite some flamenco, but this is, wow. This is an explosion. Now, you have done this production with a filmmaker, and he's from Brazil?
That's right.
Wow. And you did it in Brazil, or?
No, in London.
In London, oh, I see. Very beautiful thing. And so I think that's the moment to watch that now. Bernhard Schimpelsberger, segalia. Now my question here comes, the fills you play in, is this something the dancer would in the same way, make his or her fills? Because they have also these fills, like it's amazing. Is this inspired by this, or?
I have to be honest with you, not yet. I would love to say yes, but not yet. I mean, I'm doing a lot of things, at the same time, and I'm sort of working the rhythmic material in that I can imagine at this point. But I would love to be a bit more literal about those phrases and the solos and they are fantastic. But that was something when we worked with Israel. It was just like we were like, oh my God, we couldn't understand. I mean, it takes time, but they are so surprising. The way they end on the offbeat just before or after, and it's just every time it takes you by surprise. So I would love to work that in. Maybe that will be the next version of it.
And actually, what we will do, the people you worked with are so amazing. So we will, in the description on the podcast side, we'll put their names and having links to their videos, so people can check them out. Because you have to really see that, to get that feeling. Oh yeah, this is the palmas and the breaks. For me, it's pretty much I was this is the figuration he dances.
But if we talk in another year, I'll definitely take that as an input from you, to work in literal things in there.
Wonderful. Yeah, we've given a lot of information and advice also to the young drummers coming up. But I want finally to hear from you. Drum, or let's say rhythm, is a world language. That's something you and I share, right? Would engage in drumming be a way of learning communication on a new level for everyone out there?
The drum as an expression of rhythm, I would say yes. Not necessarily the specific drum, but rhythm as a sense of how we organize our time, how we experience our time, and the inclusiveness of rhythm. When you have, you can have the most complex rhythm and stuff going on, but you can just have somebody stop by and go and do that. And that's
exactly.
That's communication. You're sharing the same thing. You're now part of a community. Like you are, it's like being human. Like you sort of, I don't want to go off too far, but you acknowledge, what, we're the same. It's the same thing on different levels. Whether you can speak one word of French or whether you can be a poet in the French language, it doesn't matter. You're still part of that same experience. And I think rhythm does that. And also when you talk about, with your concept with TaKeTiNa, about the physical experience, I mean, that's a whole nother level. That's something that I want to learn from you about, So I'm not, I'm not able to tell you, something very concrete about that. But I mean, you're the man for that.
Yeah, but I really appreciate what you say, because people say, only if I can play this and this on this drum. No, if you're just passing by and moving along with your playing, you're part of it, you're an integral part of it, and you're opening yourself up to the most profound force in life, which is rhythm, of course. And so, it was a big, big pleasure to finally meet you, because you're kind of a brother in mind. We have a very similar background, and Austrians doing rhythm. I mean, when I grew up, you were doing what? Drums from Austria? This was like...
Shouldn't you be playing violin or piano? That was the thing.
Yes. Okay, so any final thing you want to share with us?
Yes, I would like to thank you for inviting me into this beautiful series. After your initial invitation, I went and I checked out a lot of the podcasts, and I learned about new people and their work. And I'd like to thank you to take the time to tell the story of other people and to talk about rhythm and to listen to music. And I wish you all the best, and stay healthy and well, and continue to spread the gospel of rhythm.
Thank you so much. And so finally, we want to know, Where can people find you? On the net, or how do you...
On the net, YouTube is a good channel. I have a lot of work on YouTube with my name, or on my website, which is bernhard.co.at. But Google will tell you everything.
And as I said already, this is such an amazing episode with so many people around, Bernhard. And we'll put the links and the names of these people in the description of the podcast, and you should check them out because it's really a treasure trove. So if you like what you heard, and if you like what we do, go to www.powerofrhythm.com/podcast and leave a remark. Tell us whom else you want to hear. And for now, have a great day and keep on grooving.